the blood.
How old are you now?
97.
Did you ever think that you would make it to 97?
No, not really. No, even though Mother did, I really didn't think I'd probably live that long.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think of it as quite a blessing.
Yeah.
That you're still around.
It was a blessing of the Lord. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, I could have died off from sicknesses I had,
Mm-hmm.
I've been sick sometimes, like you. It hadn't been all that long ago, maybe 3 years. Madeline and I both were sick here. I couldn't eat anything hardly for a week. And she didn't. She's about the same. And I was so weak I could hardly. I don't think I could mash a grape hardly. But we prayed, asked the church put us on the prayer line, and when you get sick, you don't feel like praying. It's a tough job to try to get your brain working in that realm, and it's just difficult, and you just are willing to lay there, and especially to have others pray for you.
What do you think, and this could be a general advice for anyone, and something maybe that you regret the most, and there again, it could be spiritual or something you did, your choice in your life, but what advice would you give anybody to not do, that is important not to do?
Well, I didn't log anything like that particularly in my mind, but I did talk to people about time to time where are you going to spend your next life, spiritually, and of course, you get into a lot of arguments on something like that. Like we used to have a club, like there's the guys that get together at lunchtime, Well, they were from all denominations type, so we wouldn't see alike, but anytime I got chances 1-to-1 and talk to them about where they're going to spend eternity, and I do that today when they get a chance.
You done.
And,
To me alone.
but we've talked to people, both me and Madeline have talked to people about various things in their life. I'm thinking now one of the fellows who just, when did he come? Yesterday, honey?
Who, honey?
Larry.
Yes, Larry.
And his wife. Just trying to, they have problems, and we try to help them by getting some of the problem areas together, and then say, well, you could do this or you could do that. and I kind of enjoy that, thinking maybe it might help them.
How do we know that what is written in the Bible is true?
How do we know?
What in the Bible is true?
Yeah. Well, I can think of one thing very definitely that points to the Bible as being true. However, you have to take faith and believe that the words, names of these men were recorded by God. So there's a belief factor still involved, and that is, I think it's in Mark maybe. It talks about it talks about the lineage. It said that God started with Adam, and then he had,
Cain and Abel?
Cain and Abel, and so on down the line. Okay, and he tells about the genealogy, 14, let's see, what is it, 14 generations between Adam and Abraham. 14 more generations between Abraham and King David, and 14 more generations between King David and Jesus. And in one of the books of the Bible, it records that when Jesus would be born, he would come from the line of David. So then, to top it off, he gave us the names of every single person clear down the line from the first man to Christ. And I never took time to count the men, the genealogy, but it's there, every single name. And when you say, well, how long did that take the 3 generations and put them together? That's 40, what is it, 10, 30, 10, 20, 30, 40, 42 generations, and it equals over 4,000 years. Now that's, God gave us those names because nobody could remember the genealogy for over 4,000 years, actually. To me, I had read the Bible at least 3 times. And I don't ever remember reading that, but obviously I did. And somehow went over my head. But the last, since just reading it one day, I ran across that. Just flabbergasted me to think that we had the names from the first man to Christ. It's unbelievable. But of course, like I say initially, there's an element of faith. You got to believe that God had the correct names that he gave them.
How do you know if a prophet is a false prophet or a true prophet of God?
A false prophet. Well, one thing, whatever that prophet prophesied, as everything he prophesied came true, as he said, he's a true prophet. If it didn't, he's not. Or he did not follow God as God would have had him to.
What about the teachings of what we consider false prophets like Joseph Smith, Ellen White, and the Jehovah Witnesses? And are they truly false prophets?
Yeah, they are. One reason is the Bible says Christ will be the last true prophet. So that was back at AD 4 or 5, whenever he was born.
Okay.
That's one really good one for the LDS Church, because they talk about their about the prophets.
Yes.
And I think that's a Mormon Church, LDS, and Jehovah Witness too, I believe.
Yeah.
They talk about their prophets. You can say, well, how could Joseph Smith be a true prophet? God said in his word that he would be the last prophet.
Switching gears a little. Do we go to heaven? Do you believe we go to heaven or hell immediately following death? And this is kind of a two-part question. Or what about those who believe we're asleep until Jesus' return?
Well, asleep might be a good name for it. I don't think there's enough in the Bible on that to make a really good answer. When we die, we go to be with the Lord, and we know that there got to be millions of people up there together or somewhere, and so we believe that whatever God had prepared for them, that's where they are. It doesn't give us a lot on what happens to people, although he does give us a lot in what he's going to do in latter days. As far as that goes, he gives us Revelation and 22 chapters of what's going to happen.
What do you think about people that have near-death experiences? Have you heard about that? Do you think that it's true when they have those?
Yeah, I sure do. I remember reading on one or hearing it on TV. I think she is a woman, and she investigated, I believe it was 19 near-death experiences, and all of them had unusual circumstances and certainly could be believable.
In Genesis chapter 6, it talks about the flood.
Mm-hmm.
with Noah.
Yes.
But it also, there's this one short verse that it says that in those days there was Nephilim or giants. And then giants.
There was what?
Nephilim or giants, because the sons of God came down and mated with
Yeah.
their beautiful women.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what have you learned about that or thought about that?
Well, what I thought about, and that was the fact that God wanted to change the race after that, and they all that were living at that time died in the flood, except Noah and his family.
Do you remember that when Moses sends out the scouts for however long, and some of them go into the land, and they say that there were men there that made them look like grasshoppers?
Yeah.
Do you remember that? Do you think that's talking about giants?
Yeah,
Yeah.
obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think he only made the two races, so that was another race of humans that he made, and they didn't follow him, and that was his method of changing the world. I'm sure all the beautiful terrain, especially the Grand Canyon, Arches National Park, and all that up there, and where'd we go?
Is that Arizona?
Yeah, in Arizona, or maybe New Mexico. Arches National Park, say that, and Lake Powell, all that sandstone formations, and the deep crevices of Hoover Dam, and the one down here in where is it? Lower Arizona,
Uh-huh.
or I can't remember which one that is. I think it's at Lake Havasu, and all those were created, and I think he did that to create a beautiful world, because it's going to be around for quite a while. And what he did was he gave us things like that to see, and all kinds of beautiful terrain. How about the great redwoods and different gorges here and there, and the falls in Niagara, and places for people to go. And what this does, it gives them a chance to see the beauty that he made. Well, was there really a God that did all this for us? Yeah, there was.
What do you find most interesting about the book of Revelation?
The book of Revelation?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the first thing that I would think about, it's hard for me to believe that God, who doesn't give us much on future, would give us 22 chapters of what he's going to do in the end time. That's sort of my thought on that. It's just amazing. As a Christian, believing the Word, I accept that as being true.
Another, just an interesting question. The holidays that we celebrate in our culture, such as Christmas, Easter, Halloween,
Yeah,
are traditional holidays
traditional holidays.
that we as a people in our culture celebrate. What is your thoughts on their pagan roots? And as Christians celebrating or should not
Well,
celebrate?
they weren't necessarily in pagan roots, at least in all of them, but they've been turned into that because Satan doesn't want people to believe. So what does he do? He muddies up the scripture, or tries to get them to believe that in a fictitious day, bunnies for Easter and Halloween was Hallows Eve. Hallows Eve, I think, originally, and those and they're things that probably were Christian to begin with, but Satan's worked overtime to give us something else, but couldn't do away with it, so he muddied it up with something that was not really true, but it like passing out the Easter eggs and things like that.
What are your thoughts on creation versus evolution? What I mean is, so many people they think they have scientific evidence and reasons to believe that evolution is the way we were created and evolved. But there's also Christians like ourselves who believe in creation. What do you? I don't know. What do you think about that, or how do you think and know that it's true?
Yeah.
I know it's kind of an open-ended question, but
Even common sense will tell you that something tangible don't come from nothing. Something doesn't come from nothing. It had to have been initially made and existed. And I think what it was a part of the devil's work to do the same thing, to get people shifted to something else that was untrue. And I think I read something in a book that said even Darwin didn't really push that. It was something that he thought about, but wasn't even convinced himself. And people, then Satan's there again to pick up something and pick up the ball and run with it and promote it. And that's why it got to be so big in belief. People didn't want to serve the Lord, so they picked that up, so they had something to back up the fact that why they don't believe, why they don't go to church, and etc. And they wanted a fall guy or a fall thought to carry them through.
What are you most peaceful about at this point in your life that you feel most at peace at?
Most peaceful about?
Yeah.
Well, I tell you, I've done a lot of really lousy things in my life, and I'm just really happy about the fact that God says in His Word that we're saved by grace. I wish I'd have followed Him closer and more righteous, and I think I got off on left field like anybody else here or there. Didn't make the right decision, but God loves us and He draws us back and wants us to follow Him as His Word says.
What do you find most troubling, or what troubles your heart the most at this point in life?
That I didn't live a more righteous life and do a whole lot more for when I was serving Him.
And define righteous for us, because each person has this. Define what righteous means to you, because different people think different things.
Yeah, that's true. Well, righteous is doing the will of God, of course, and I'm not sure that each time we made a decision, we may not have thought about it in that sense where we could say, well, I made the right decision, or I thought I made the right decision, or sometimes I didn't really pray about it and ask the Lord to give me the right decision.
How important do you think your prayer life is as a Christian and your Christian walk, and what do you think is the most important part of your prayer life, or important thing, or essence of it?
Well, I think the prayer life, I know, I used to pray a lot of times, especially when I was single, and I did it more out of the fact that, well, I'm supposed to, and I want to follow the Lord in my mind, and so I prayed, but it's not very honorable prayer as it should be, and prayer should be more your determination and your love for the Lord, and your desire to do, to follow Him right thinking, and stay with it, and be very determined about it.
Yeah.
I
know sometimes myself, I think about, when I pray, I'm always asking for things.
Oh.
And I try to make a bigger effort myself to thank God for things.
Yeah.
And ask Him for forgiveness. Because a lot of people, I think they only pray when they want something or they need something. And we can all be victims of that. But
yeah, we have that tendency, John, to, I ask for this and I ask for that, and ask for prayer for the dog that are sick, and the food we eat, try to thank Him for this. That's one place where I have to thank my dad. He was very meticulous at saying grace. And I think that rubbed off on me, and so I really felt like I should thank the Lord for giving me daily sustenance.
Mm-hmm.
What was the most inspirational thing that Grandpa influenced your life? And of course, the same thing with Grandma. What do you find the most special thing that they did to influence your life as Grandpa and then as Grandma?
Well, I think the determination of both of them in their walk towards the Lord was very, very spiritual to me, and it was true and very positive and intended to be that way. Yeah, and I felt that they were were doing right, and that should affect me too.
We could probably wrap it up now, but I don't know if you have anything else you want to say or mention, or something we forgot to say, or
Well,
words of wisdom, anything.
yeah, I say I probably pray for missionaries pretty steady.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we give to one mission. There was a pastor who started an outreach, and he ran that for 50 years before he passed away.
Wow.
And his wife lived a couple of years longer, and so on. And to see that really thrive and expand, Madeline and I, decided to share in that financially. And I think God expects you, for one thing, when you get to heaven, if you haven't shared finances or anything or supported anything, what are the gifts that he says there will be gifts handed out? Doesn't say what they are, but gifts must be something that people would want or desire to receive. And if you haven't sent anything, then what do you got to draw on? Very important, and I can see that because finances, of course, money is one of the key things. It's what runs the world, basically. And for you to give is quite it's an honor, and it's doing the will of God, not your will. And God is very good about it. Normally you don't watch people to see action and results. And unless you know people, friends, acquaintances over a long period of time. And consequently, I can think of, a few people I've known maybe several years. And those that didn't tithe, invariably, after years, didn't have a whole lot. And the ones that I knew did, they seemed to always do better. And I can think of one fellow. He's a good Christian, and you could depend on him serving the Lord, but he just couldn't see tithing. Too difficult. And I never saw him really blessed. And maybe, if we got the chance to follow people, you could see the action and results, and consequently change your life accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's one of the things that it causes all kinds of problems. Lots of divorces over financial problems. One of the major things, perhaps we could say, and other things, a lot of other things, but that's certainly one of them.
It makes me think of what I think Jesus said: easier is it to fit a camel through the eye of a needle than a rich man to enter into heaven.
Yeah. I think the reason he said that made a real good point is because it showed how man thought about his money, finances, or his position. Another example is the man said, well, I have much goods stored up in the barns, and I will eat, drink, and be merry. And the Lord said, thou fool, this night thy soul shall be taken from you. I mean, there's some pretty big eye-openers in the scriptures for things, many things like that. Has to do with human thoughts, behaviors, problems.
Okay, Uncle Don. Well, thank you for we'll let you go, but thank you for sharing your words with us and your time with us.
Yeah.
We appreciate it.
Yeah, I might have said some things that would be a lot more helpful to you, but I haven't been able to read the scriptures. You say, well, why didn't you listen to them? Well, I tell you, like being here, I overdid with things. It ate up my time, and there's another thing. I just didn't take time to read as much as I should.
Mm-hmm.
I did take time to go to church steady. And in fact, I went so steady that Madeline got real upset. And I can see that because I hardly want to go on vacation. I mean, I want to go, I love to go on vacation, but I didn't like to cut out a choir like we were in where we went to church after I married her.
Any favorite hymns or songs? Good question. It's okay if you don't know.
Well, I used to listen to the quartet songs. I always really liked them, enjoyed them. Of course, they were foot tappers, and so on. But there's some like about The Blood, and that was written by, what was he? Written by the black fella whose parents lived out, I think, San Fernando Valley, somewhere out there.
Andre Crouch?
Andre Crouch. And the blood that gives me strength from day to day, but it shall never lose its power. Really like that. And he wrote that, Andre Crouch, and then some of the other quartets had some good numbers I liked. Like When I'm Gone, the 30 minutes. 30 minutes is not enough time to really have a kind of a funeral. It's just, you can hardly say anything. So it's just a matter of getting put away. But I think if there's a song, let's see, when I've come to the last mile of the way, is written by Audrey Meyer. That would maybe be a song I would have if they're going to have a regular funeral session, funeral service.
Okay.
But I was in the service, so Madeline and I will both be married at the National Cemetery out here in Riverside.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't filled up in the meantime. I don't know where we go from there. I don't know where there's another one around. The one in Los Angeles filled up.
Well, that's okay.
Yeah.
It's more important where you'll be going after that.
Yeah, that's right. More important where you're going after.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm sure many people wonder, what in the world are we going to do up there? And so many people, you stop and think about how many Christians there are in the world today, and there's a lot of people. And you think about this been going on for not hundreds of years, but thousands. Well, it's a good thing there's a lot of airspace up there. You're going to need a lot.
Well, if he can create all this universe, finding room for us is but a blink of the eye for him.
Yeah, not too much trouble, man. We have no concept of how big God really is. You just have to start thinking about the planets and the skies. What people don't see today is, and not only young people, but even a lot of elderly people, you don't see the stars. Kid, I remember when I was a little kid in Santa Barbara, and we had nice days in summer, and lived there in Santa Barbara, and those kids sometimes would lay out on the lawn, and when you lay down on the lawn where you're looking straight up, and you cannot imagine how many stars there were. It's just unbelievable. Nowadays, you hardly find any. You know, it's because of the light.
Yeah.
You know,
All the
light
people.
has blocked them out. Yeah, little tiny burgs became bigger towns, and bigger towns became even bigger. And the lights, like we look over here where March Field is, used to be dark over there. Well, they built new buildings and businesses over there on the north end of it, where they had a lot of extra, parking lot mainly, but they had set plenty of acres aside for whatever they wanted to do. And you look over that way nowadays, it's a whole lot lighter than it used to be. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for your time, Uncle
It's so
Don.
perfect.
Okay.
And it's your thoughts are so clear.
Well, like I said, if I could see, I certainly would have been reading a lot more scripture.
Oh, Don, I
Yeah.
never knew anyone in my whole
Yeah.
life that prays as much as you, that
Yeah.
has as much faith as you, and it's been as most faithful to the Lord from all the things that have happened to you that a lot of people would have turned away from the Lord. And you just turn to the Lord more and more. And most people never do that, Don.
Yeah. Thank you, baby.